Sylvester Zottola. On October 4th, 2018, Sylvester Zottola pulled his SUV into a McDonald's drive-thru in the Bronx. The 71-year-old real estate businessman was known for his tough approach to business and connections to organized crime families in New York. As he waited for his order in the vehicle, he had no idea he was being tracked by a GPS device planted on his car weeks earlier. Zottola had survived multiple attempts on his life in the previous year. In November 2017, he was stabbed in the neck and chest outside his home. In December, 3 men invaded his house, stabbed him, and cut his throat. Somehow, he survived both attacks. But this time would be different. As Zottola's SUV idled in the narrow drive-thru lane, a dark sedan pulled up alongside him. The driver's window lowered. Within seconds, 5 gunshots were fired at point-blank range. The bullets tore through the side window of Zottola's vehicle, striking him in the head, chest, and shoulder. The shots were precise and clearly intended to guarantee death. There was no chance of survival. As blood spread across the interior of the SUV, Zottola slumped over the steering wheel. His foot slipped off the brake, causing his vehicle to roll forward slowly before stopping against the restaurant wall. First responders found him still strapped in his seatbelt, the engine running, food order undelivered. He was pronounced dead at the scene. What investigators discovered in the following months was more disturbing than the execution-style killing itself. The hit had been orchestrated by Anthony Zottola Sr., Sylvester's own son. Anthony had paid Bashan Shelton, a member of the Bloods gang, $200,000 to have his father killed. The GPS tracker was the key to finding Sylvester at the drive-thru that day, where he had become a sitting target with no escape route. The father's death allowed the son to take control of the family's multi-million-dollar real estate empire, turning a simple drive-thru visit into a calculated assassination. Anthony Makowski. On April 24, 2005, a warm spring night in Jacksonville, Florida, Anthony Makowski pulled into a McDonald's parking lot with friends. The 21-year-old Navy man had spent the evening at a nightclub and stopped for late-night food. What began as a routine fast food run would end in his death, captured entirely on the restaurant's security cameras. Around 2:15 a.m., Makowski and his friends were waiting in the drive-thru lane when they became involved in a verbal altercation with another group of young men. The argument quickly escalated. Security footage showed Makowski exiting his vehicle and confronting the other group in the parking lot. Words were exchanged, tensions rose, and within moments the confrontation turned physical. Makowski was grabbed by 20-year-old Lacey Eberly, who applied what witnesses later described as a chokehold, or headlock, from behind. The security camera captured Makowski's initial struggle as Eberly maintained his grip. For approximately 90 seconds, Eberly held Makowski in the restraint. The medical examiner would later determine this caused a fatal interruption of blood flow to Makowski's brain. In those critical seconds, oxygen deprivation began causing irreversible damage. Witnesses reported seeing Makowski's face turning purple, his legs kicking less and less as the seconds passed. By the time Eberly released his hold, Makowski collapsed to the pavement, unresponsive. Bystanders attempted CPR, but the damage was already done. Paramedics arrived within minutes, finding Makowski without pulse or respiration. He was transported to Shands Jacksonville Medical Center, where he was pronounced dead. The autopsy revealed Makowski had died from asphyxiation due to compression of his neck blood vessels. Despite the clear video evidence of the incident, prosecutors declined to file criminal charges, ruling that Eberly had acted in self-defense. This decision sparked outrage and eventually led to a civil lawsuit from Makowski's family, challenging how a fast food argument had turned into a death sentence. Anthony Tony Eyles. On September 8, 2021, Anthony Eyles pulled his vehicle into a McDonald's drive-thru in Vancouver, British Columbia. The 42-year-old elevator mechanic was making a routine stop for breakfast before heading to work. He had just celebrated his wedding anniversary days before, and photos on social media showed a happy family man with his wife and 2 young children, ages 8 and 6. As Eyles reached the payment window, he handed over his bank card to pay for his meal. The transaction complete, the employee returned his card, but instead of landing in Eyles' hand, it fell to the ground outside his vehicle. It was a small mistake that would have fatal consequences. Eyles put his car in park but left the engine running as he opened his door to retrieve the card. What happened next was captured on the restaurant's surveillance cameras. As Eyles leaned out to reach for his card, his vehicle suddenly moved forward. The gap between his SUV and the building's brick wall rapidly closed. In a split second, Eyles became pinned between his car door and the restaurant's structure. The pressure immediately crushed his chest and abdomen, restricting his ability to breathe. Drive-thru staff heard his initial cry for help and rushed outside, but found themselves unable to move the vehicle or free him from the deadly compression. For several agonizing minutes, Eyles remained conscious, trapped in the narrowing space as his vital organs were compressed. Oxygen deprivation began affecting his brain as he struggled for breath against the immovable wall and weight of his own vehicle. By the time emergency responders arrived and managed to move the vehicle, the damage was catastrophic. Despite immediate medical attention, Anthony Eyles was pronounced dead at the scene from a traumatic asphyxiation and internal injuries. The Vancouver Police Department later determined that he had likely bumped the gear shift while reaching down, causing the vehicle to lurch forward while he was partially outside it. What should have been a mundane breakfast stop had turned deadly in mere seconds over a dropped bank card. Richard Lowrie. On October 17, 2022, Richard Lowrie celebrated his 86th birthday with family in Olathe, Kansas. After the gathering, the elderly man decided to treat himself to a meal at a local McDonald's drive-thru. It was a cool autumn evening when Lowrie pulled his silver Honda sedan into the narrow lane of the restaurant. Friends would later describe him as an active senior who still enjoyed his independence despite his advanced age. As Lowrie reached the payment window and prepared to order, he accidentally dropped his eyeglasses from the vehicle. The prescription glasses fell just outside his car door, close enough that he thought he could retrieve them without leaving his vehicle. Security camera footage later showed Lowrie opening his door and leaning out while still seated behind the wheel. What he didn't realize was that his foot was slipping off the brake pedal. In a tragic sequence captured by the restaurant's surveillance system, Lowrie's body stretched further out of the vehicle as he reached for the glasses. His foot then made contact with the accelerator pedal. The Honda lurched forward suddenly and with significant force. The open car door struck the building's exterior wall, creating an instant crush point with Lowrie caught in between. The impact pinned Lowrie's head and upper body between the door and the wall. Witnesses reported hearing a sickening sound as his skull made contact with the brick exterior. Drive-thru employees rushed outside but found Lowrie already unconscious, with severe trauma visible to his head and neck. The pressure had caused immediate and catastrophic damage to his brainstem. First responders arrived within minutes and managed to free him from the compression point, but the injury had already proven fatal. Despite resuscitation attempts, Richard Lowrie was pronounced dead at the scene. The medical examiner later confirmed that blunt force trauma to the head was the cause of death. The date on his death certificate would match that of his birth certificate, a cruel coincidence that turned a birthday celebration into his final day. Kendrick Engram Jr. On June 26, 2022, temperatures in Columbus, Georgia reached a sweltering 96 degrees Fahrenheit. 3-year-old Kendrick Engram Jr. spent the day with his grandmother and other family members, visiting church and running various errands. The little boy, known for his bright smile and energetic personality, had no way of knowing that this ordinary Sunday would be his last. After a day of activities, the family stopped at a Wendy's drive-thru around 5:30 p.m. Kendrick's grandmother was driving the SUV with several other children inside. After ordering food, they returned home, where the grandmother and other children exited the vehicle. In the confusion of managing multiple young children, a critical oversight occurred. Kendrick remained buckled in his car seat in the third row of the SUV, forgotten and left behind. For the next 2 hours and 45 minutes, the temperature inside the vehicle climbed rapidly. Scientific studies show that on a 96-degree day, the interior of a parked car can reach 124 degrees in just 30 minutes. After 1 hour, temperatures can exceed 140 degrees. Kendrick was trapped in these escalating conditions, unable to free himself from his car seat. The physiological effects would have been swift and severe. Medical experts describe how a child's body temperature rises 3 to 5 times faster than an adult's. As the heat intensified, Kendrick would have experienced increasing distress. His breathing would have become labored as his body attempted to cool itself. Dehydration would have set in rapidly, causing his heart to beat faster while his organs began to shut down. Around 8:15 p.m., Kendrick's uncle borrowed the SUV to make a food run, returning to the same Wendy's drive-thru. While waiting in line, he discovered the child's motionless body still strapped in the back seat. He immediately drove to the emergency room, but it was too late. Hospital staff pronounced Kendrick dead from hypothermia. His small body had simply been unable to withstand the extreme heat. Inside the closed vehicle, with no water and no means of escape, the toddler had suffered a slow, agonizing death while his family remained unaware just yards away. Charles Wood Jr. On December 20, 2018, a cold winter night in St. Louis, Charles Wood Jr. pulled his car into a Jack-in-the-Box drive-thru. The 20-year-old was a former high school football player who worked at a local factory. Friends described him as outgoing and quick to smile. It was around 10 p.m. when he placed his order at the speaker box, then drove forward to the payment window. When Wood reached the pickup window, the employee handed him his food order. But there was a problem. The bag was just out of his reach. Rather than opening his door and stepping out, Wood chose to remain seated while extending his upper body out of the driver's side window. Security camera footage would later show him stretching his arm toward the bag, fingers outstretched, as the employee tried to close the gap. What happened next occurred in mere seconds. As Wood leaned further out, his foot apparently slipped off the brake pedal. The car was still in drive with the engine running. Witnesses reported seeing the vehicle suddenly lurch backward in an arc. Before Wood could pull himself back inside, his car slammed into a tree situated near the drive-thru lane. The impact caught him between the driver's door and the tree trunk. The force of the collision immediately compressed Wood's torso, head, neck, and legs. Bystanders rushed to help, but the position of the vehicle made it nearly impossible to free him quickly. Wood was conscious for the first moments after impact, gasping for breath as the pressure on his chest increased. Employees and customers tried desperately to move the car, but without equipment, they could not generate enough force. Emergency responders arrived within 6 minutes, but found Wood unresponsive at the scene. Despite their efforts to extract him and begin life-saving measures, the damage was too severe. The medical examiner would later determine that Wood died from traumatic asphyxia and extensive internal injuries. The compression had collapsed his ribcage, restricting his ability to breathe while causing catastrophic damage to his internal organs. A simple food order had turned fatal in less than 10 seconds because of a momentary lapse in judgment and a vehicle that was never put in park. If you want to see more videos like this, click the video on screen now and make sure to subscribe.